Hi, I'm your host, Anahita Champion. Welcome back to the SPNN Forum. I'm excited today to have a conversation with Roger Barr, a local St. Paul author and a returning SPNN board member. Stay with us for more conversation with Roger Barr. Well, welcome, Roger. It's wonderful to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for all you've done in the past with SPNN being on the board, and you're a returning board member, which people can follow your journey with that. But here today, we're talking about your incredible career and your philanthropic work. You're a local St. Paul author, and there's a twist to that because you partner with food shelves and you tell the most amazing stories. But before we get into any of that, tell me a little bit about your history with writing and your history with telling stories.
I'm a St. Paul native since 1969 when I came up to go to college at Hamline University. And except for a couple of summers, I've stayed in St. Paul and have lived in the same house 47 years in St. Paul. I started writing seriously in my 20s and professionally at the end of my 20s. And through the years, I've had day jobs that have been long-term and significant. I was an editor and a publisher for an international trade association. I was a nonprofit executive for 15 years, but I always wrote on the side. And over the years, I have published 10 books. I have had 35 or 38 short stories published. I'm a playwright that's had produced a play that won an award. I've received numerous writing and awards. I've done journalism, the ad copy, a little bit of everything. But the Bartholomew family Christmas stories that we're talking about today really came about totally by accident, as all good holiday traditions do. You don't set out to start something, it just kind of happens.
You don't have a plan.
In 1996, I wrote a one-off Christmas story about a nativity scene. I was walking down Grand Avenue near where the old Hungry Mind bookstore is for longtime St. Paul residents. And I saw a nativity scene set up in the window, and it just struck a thought in me. Wouldn't it be nice to have one that was life-size that you could just walk into and be part of that moment and part of that experience? And so I wrote a story about a man who constructed a life-size, lifelike nativity scene with 50 figures, counting people and animals. And it had a very special secret attached to it that his son discovers during the time when they were setting it up one time. And it redefines the relationship between the father and the son. So I wrote that story in 1996. It was published in the Villager, My Villager newspaper it's called now, in 1997.
Sure.
And that started a tradition that is now in its 26th year. Every year I've written a new story about this same family.
Congratulations.
25 of them have been published. The 26th one is being considered for publication by the St. Paul Pioneer Press as we speak, and we should hear back there. I'm always cautiously optimistic, but never count my chickens before they hatch. And so over the years, these stories have celebrated the holiday and looked at the holiday from both a spiritual and a secular level, what the meaning of the holiday is from those different aspects. And it has also explored all kinds of issues. It's looked at family issues. I've looked at social issues ranging from addiction and recovery, racism, poverty, depression, and of course politics have creeped in, and it's very challenging to be able to not write about issues and take positions on anything, but to talk about what the impact of politics is on us.
Sure, sure.
And this year's story does that.
So these are two of the copies that you have with us today. Can we just show the audience of some of your previous work?
First say that everybody was always asking, when can I get these collections in,
right.
Stories in a collection? And so in 2011, we collected the first 13 stories into this book called Getting Ready for Christmas and Other Stories. And all of the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, were donated to area food shelves from this book. I've never actually made any money off of these books. And then in 2019, the next group of stories, 9 more stories, were collected in this book called The Christmas Promise.
Wow.
And again, those proceeds have also gone to the food shelf. Between book sales
Sure.
and asking people outright to give cash, straightforward cash. Since I did the first reading in 2004, we've collected more than $80,000 for area food shelves.
Outstanding. That is remarkable. That makes a huge, huge contribution to the community. Let's talk about the cover art.
The cover art, I'll hold it up again, was done by a man who was the editorial cartoonist for the St. Paul Pioneer Press back in the days when they had an editorial cartoonist. Kirk Anderson was his name. And I just went through the manuscript of the stories and underlined images and gave it to him and said, make it look good, and that's what he did.
He made it look great.
And then he did the same thing with the second collection. I said, make it look similar enough, but make it look different so people don't think I already own that book. I don't need to buy another one.
Sure, well, there's, a common theme going on here. So if I understand, the first collection, the press run is sold out.
Yes.
Well, congratulations, but also wonderful for the donations and where they go. The second copy is, the second edition, I should say, is potentially available, but they have to reach out to you.
They should reach out to me personally, and fingers crossed my email address will appear on the screen when this is broadcast, and they can just email me and say they're interested, and we'll take it from there.
Sure, and your email is?
ROGERBARR1951@gmail.com.
There you go. There we have it. Well, what do you want most for people to take away from the work that you're doing, from the writings, these stories, the meaning behind them, the impact that they can make?
I think 2 things. One, I want them to be entertained and have a story that gives them a little bit of a lift for the holiday season. And when I was up around 2022 stories, every single story was somebody's favorite, they told me. And so they've been well received. And so I want people to have them. We say keep them with your Christmas decorations, don't put them on the bookshelf, but if they're with your decorations, you get them out every year.
Absolutely.
And you look through them again and reread your favorite ones. So the entertainment aspect is one thing, but also the food shelf effort that goes with these stories. I want people to recognize that having something to eat is something that everybody deserves, no questions asked.
Right.
And in the 2003 story, I incorporated a food shelf into the plot line. And that food shelf has been mentioned, I think, in every story since then. And sometimes the whole story is set not at the home of the Bartholomew family, but in the food shelf. And we essentially build in a little bit of a commercial for donating to area food shelves. And this year I am supporting the Hallie Q Community Center with a reading should we talk about that now or in a minute?
We can absolutely talk about it now. I've been ramping up for this moment.
Okay, so on the 3rd of December at 2 p.m. at SPNN Studios, there will be a public reading of this story. It's a staged reading, so people are assuming character roles and will be reading the lines of the characters, not me.
Okay.
I'm a narrator and I'll narrate the story, but all of the seven characters who appear in it will be read by people.
Sure.
And the reading will be videotaped, or whatever the proper term is for capturing things on video these days, video recorded. And it will, later in the month, it will appear on St. Paul Neighborhood Network's cable channels.
Absolutely. We are so delighted to have you here on the
It's a
3rd.
thrill to have them on.
What time can people expect to be here for your reading?
For the reading on December 3rd, Sunday, 2 p.m. is the start time of the program.
Okay.
And since it's being taped, there'll be some work around that, but we hope to go through it on a live read-through once we get started.
Wonderful.
So be here at 2 o'clock.
Be here at 2. And do they connect with you on any RSVPs, or is that something
I think
the
they
team
just-
can take care of for you?
I think they just come here.
Wonderful. All are welcome. If you're tuning in now, welcome to the SPNN Forum. I'm chatting with local St. Paul artist and I'm going to say philanthropist, also returning board member, Roger Barr. Roger, you're telling us about this event that's coming up on December 3rd. How long have you been partnering with local food shelves, and why choose to go that route with the philanthropy work that you do?
For my other work, I did some research one time and I found out that in the United States, if you earn the median family income, which was under $50,000 in 2003, that you were in the top 10% of the world's population of more than 6 billion people in terms of wealth.
Wow.
And I have never felt poor since then, ever. I was so stunned by that.
Right, the numbers are low.
Hunger was an issue that was getting attention at that time, and I thought, well, what can I do about that besides writing a check? And it was, well, get other people to write checks or donate food too. And so 2004, we imitated what was in the story of 2003 by organizing a reading where people originally just brought food that we donated, but then we switched to cash because they can do so much with cash as opposed to if you bring them a package of Kraft macaroni and cheese, once that's gone, it's gone.
Sure.
But if you give them the same amount of money, they can buy 10 of those or
Sure.
so. So the cash is really what does the best thing for them.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about the philanthropic message there. I'm huge into doing that. I've donated and hosted food shelf, donation banks before. And it's really the act that makes a big difference, right? Somebody is definitely going to enjoy a meal on their table that they couldn't afford by going to the food shelf and having that support. But it's also the $5 that somebody might give, it gives them a little bit of confidence to maybe go purchase something. It gives them some hope. So there's so much that goes into donating, a non-perishable food item. What has your personal, emotional, mental state been with doing this?
It always feels good to know that your donation will help somebody else. And not only does it put food in their tummies, but they also can feel somebody cares about me who doesn't even know me.
Right.
Somebody cares about me who I'll never meet. They cared enough to make sure that I had a meal to put on the table for myself and my family tonight.
Right. And that goes a long way.
It does. It goes a very long ways.
So you were sharing a little bit earlier that you have some recurring characters that have been part of these stories over the past 24 years. Do we get to hear about that today, or what the
Sure.
resemblance is?
In 2003 is when I did the research about income, but 2 years earlier, I was working on probably the 4th or 5th story, and I was already running into, okay, what do I write about now? I've covered this, I've done that, done this, and so, and this is a spoiler alert, folks, I decided to do the most radical thing I could think of. And so 2 teenage boys got drunk. They were daring one another, and they ended up destroying the nativity scene that the whole series is based around. It's 50 figures.
Oh, no.
One pushed one over, and the other one pushed another one over, and pretty soon it turned into a contest.
Now this is the story, right?
This is a story.
Okay, I
This is
got
not
real
real.
concerned.
This is a story about the nativity scene that the central character
Sure.
inherited from his father and sets up every year.
Wow.
So there was police work involved in the course of this story, and I wanted to make sure that the work was actually adequate and represented well, and so I asked Tony Carter, who was on the St. Paul Board of Education at that time, and I knew that her husband was a police officer, I asked if he would be willing to read this story and correct any of the things that needed to be corrected so the police work was accurately portrayed. And she said, sure, he'll do it. So he did. And we struck up a friendship as a result of that, and I changed the name of the police officer in the story to Officer Carter. And living in Miriam Park and typing away, I was thinking of Officer Wyatt was the original character's name. I was thinking of Officer Wyatt as just a common guy, a white guy, and in changing the name, I knew that I couldn't just take the name. I had to change the race of the character too to honor the name correctly.
Sure.
So I did.
Sure.
So a black character was introduced into the series, and the fictional Officer Carter introduced the next character, who is a recurring character, who runs a independent food shelf called the Open Cupboard. Oh. And he runs it out of his double garage, and it's a renegade operation. And he says numerous times during the course of this series is, I don't have any applications, there are no limits, there are no restrictions, and there's no waiting. You come, you take food, you eat. Mm-hmm. And he says it's worked for 20 years. So Handyman is the name of this person, and we learn in this series story this year where the name came from.
Okay.
And because one of the characters says, where did the name Handyman come from?
Sure.
Because that's what everybody knows him as. And so we learned about that. And over the years, the central character, Matt, has been the searcher, like we all are, trying to find the key to this, to that, the other thing. But Handyman, with this idea that everybody deserves to have a full stomach regardless, no questions asked, he has become the moral conscience of the series, and he is the one, year after year, who gets to dispense the moral of the story in whatever it is done.
Sure.
Through his. And the three fictional men of central character Matt, the fictional police officer Carter, and Handyman have formed a fast friendship, and they get together for breakfast every Tuesday morning.
Every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday.
I'd love to join them for some conversation.
This year they have breakfast in the series at the opening, and they go to the Hope Breakfast Bar because Matt thinks that they need all the hope they can get at this time of the period. So the optimistic name is what, and the eclectic menu, if you've ever been there.
Oh, it's delicious.
Yes.
Absolutely. Look at that. Like all the different messages that you have integrated. And now this year you're partnering with Hallie Q. This is not your first year working with Hallie.
This is the 9th year in a row that
Wow.
we've worked with Hallie Q Brown. And we've raised $35,000, $40,000, I imagine, for them.
Wow, wonderful. How else do you think the community can help? If it's not attending this or watching this or donating, what other ways in your mind can help provide hope and action?
One of the things I would encourage people to do is to remember that food shelves need food all year long, and it's feel good to donate in the holiday season, but think of it in June and July.
Right.
And write a check during June and July to the food shelf of your choice. It doesn't need to be Hallie, although I'm sure they'd be excited to have your check. But write a check to a food shelf. There's lots of them around, and they all do good work.
Sure. Well, let's take a little dive into that scenario. June and July poses different complexities than the holidays, right? There's different foods that people might consume, different diabetic needs that people might have. They need, of course, produce, but also the non-perishable food items. Folks with children, a lot of the time, if they're not in childcare, they're at home, and that's even more food that they have to consume.
And by the neighborhoods, if you're donating actual food, and they accept actual food too, the demographic makeup of the neighborhood could influence what you choose to donate. But then also other kinds of products that we buy at the grocery store that are not food, like diapers for children and cleaning supplies, dishwasher liquid, and those kinds of things are also helpful to donate if you have them.
Sure.
But also writing those checks gives the food shelves the most amount of flexibility because they can go out and buy what they know their customers need.
Their folks need,
clients.
right. You know, hygiene products, socks, underwear, first aid kits, all the
Yes.
things, shampoo, and some good old food. Where would you like to go from here after this year's fundraising reading?
Well, there are two answers to that question. One is in terms of what am I going to do about a story next year, because I get asked every year. And usually when I'm pushing the lawnmower around the yard in June and July, ideas come around and I start watching what's going on around the world that needs some sort of comment on. So I never promised there will be a story, but the chances are that something will spark my interest are fairly good, and I'll do something. And one thing I've never done a long flashback, and I think I would be interested in doing that just for the challenge of starting in the present and going to the past and getting back to the present in a way that people can follow along. The other thing I'll be doing is, and this is on a subject that's totally away from this, I have a new book coming out.
Do tell.
That is a nonfiction book. It is a reconstruction of the police investigation of an unsolved murder case in St. Paul in 1937.
Wow.
And I was able to see the actual police records and read contemporary news accounts from that period of time, and was able to reconstruct the police investigation literally hour by hour at the beginning and eventually year by year, because the case stretched out over 16 years, and it was before it got to the last date in the file.
Sure.
And the case has never been solved.
It's a cold case.
It's a cold case,
Wow.
and that's a term from the 70s, by the
Sure.
way. And
I love true crime.
This was in the 1930s. And that's the first part of the book. The second part of the book actually goes through and examines the reasons why the case was never solved. And the issues that we wrestle with today are vulnerability of women on our streets, because there's a woman that was murdered, economic insecurity, whether we face that today. The Depression was going on in the 1930s. Police reform is going on today. It was going on at that time there. Mistrust of the police was evident then. It's evident now. Race and racism are key reasons why the case was never solved. And so people who are interested in those issues today can go back and see how they actually influenced a police investigation.
Sure. Now that's a big flashback, really, if you think about it. And sometimes we're kind of curious if the times are too different or not. But how amazing. Where can folks find your work?
The book I just described, called A Murder on the Hill, will be published by the Minnesota Historical Society Press in April of next year, April 2nd, 2024. And the one book here that is not in that is not out of print is available. If you contact me by email and say you want to get it, we'll figure out how to get it to you. And your purchase price goes to the Hallie Q food shelf.
Wonderful. Wow. You are quite the admirable human to really want to share all these different components of not only St. Paul, but also just humanity as a whole. Was there anything else you'd like folks to know? Anything else you'd like to share? Encouraging words and ask?
Well, I want people to do what this year's story recommends, is stay engaged in the world, but know that you'd have to take a step out every so often for a brief respite and recharge your batteries and take a deep breath and then step back in. The solutions to all of our issues, and we will work on them forever, but the solutions are in the role of being active, but you can't do that all the time. You have to back out. And this year I was quite concerned because mental health is a big issue in our country right now, and this story actually addresses that issue.
Wow. Now, only curious ears and eyes are going to have to wait until December 3rd to really hear just a glimmer of
You're
it.
going to hear it in person with actors on December 3rd, and watch for it in the Pioneer Press.
Roger, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for all you do, and welcome back to SPNN's board, where that spot's been waiting for you. Well, that's all we have today for SPNN Forum with Roger Barr. Stay tuned for next time. Thanks again.